I'm going to start this podcast by asking you, the listener, a question. Now, as soon as I ask you this question, you're going to have an impulse answer. But I want you to make a pact with me right now. Wait until you've listened to this complete episode and then sat in silence for 3 minutes, really contemplating before you let yourself answer for real. Do we have a deal? Let's do it. Hello and welcome to the MSP Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Gillette. Now, I started this podcast with a teaser. I'm going to ask you a question, and that question is this. In your career, do you want to be good, great, or the best? Good, great, or the best? Resist the urge to answer until we've really thought this through. By the way, here's a couple of prefaces. Obviously, nobody wants to be bad. So I'm assuming that you don't want to be bad. I'm assuming you don't want to be average, right? I think that's, if you're listening to a podcast that's going to help you in your career, I'm assuming that you're already above that stage. Here's another preface. There is no wrong answer to this question. And that is not a trick, okay? It's not like I'm trying to get you to go from good to best. There's actually big pros and cons to any of these answers. And the truth is that one of them is right for you and the other two are not. But it's very important, especially if you want to advance in your career at all, that you know the answer to this question of what you really want, okay? This is coming from a sales coach and consultant. It's incredibly difficult for me to work with people who don't know how to answer this question. So if we really want to answer it, especially in this little limiting framework that I've given you, let's break down what it means to be good, great, or the best. Now, in this context, we're going to be talking about selling. Whether you're an owner of an MSP who sells or you're a dedicated salesperson, we're talking about just the craft of selling. If this is your career, that's great. Here's the thing. If you're another role in the company or you don't even work for an MSP and you're listening to this is all going to apply. But if I use any examples, I'm going to use examples within that framework. Okay? So to begin, what does it mean to be good at sales? A good salesperson usually hits their goals. More often than not, they achieve what they're trying to achieve. Sometimes they miss their goals, but they're always leaning in the right direction. A good salesperson is going to slowly build reputation over time. That means that their reputation, they didn't start with a reputation. They're not widely known necessarily, but they are doing good work. They're achieving results. And the truth is, here's the thing about life. If you just show up every day and do a half decent job, you're already in the 75th percentile, right? So that's a definition of good, unfortunately, or fortunately in our culture, that's what that means. Now, good people will typically rely on themselves, okay? They must rely on themselves because often people who are good, but not quite great, don't really have a system around them that is sort of creating or begetting success, okay? All of it must come from within. With that, one of the cons is that they oftentimes cannot recreate their success in team members. Now, this is a little bit of a nuanced opinion, but I often see that people who are good, they just achieve that level. Oftentimes, there's a natural ability there, okay? And typically, people with natural ability don't have to work as hard as people with no natural ability. What that means is because they've never developed those sort of teeth gritting, brow wetting habits that the other people have had to forge, they oftentimes basically just don't know how to work as hard on their craft. So they plateau at the level of their talent. And they might pick up some tips or tricks here and there, but in reality, they sort of are who they are. And that means people with natural talent typically have the least amount of success recreating their results in other people. Good. That leads to people who are good are often very content with where they are, okay? They're good, they got where they are, they're hitting their results most of the time, and that is fine. Now, that might sound like a slight, but actually being content is pretty profound. Because when you're content with where you are, it doesn't take up much of your headspace when you're not at work. That's one of the disadvantages of sales as a whole, is that when you're working sales, your brain is kind of always on. You're always thinking about your sales. But if you're fine with being good, then you can check out. Mentally, you can go home, spend time with your spouse, spend time with your kids, spend time on your hobbies, and you do not let those work picadillos, those lingering weekend emails, you don't let those things bleed over into the areas of your life that you don't want them to have access to. That's a huge pro to being good. Finally, people who are good, they hope to win. Nothing wrong with that. Okay, sometimes they win, often, but not always. So they usually have some degree of hope. Man, I hope this thing is good. I hope that the variables outside of my control all line up just right so that this goes my way. Now, if you think about it that way, being good, not so bad. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be good. Here's the thing. Sometimes, like I'll coach an MSP owner or I'll coach a CEO, and they have this rhetoric and they have this story that they're spinning that they want to be the best, or even worse, that they are the best. But in reality, they're just good. They don't want to think about it when they're not there. They don't really want to grow any more than they have. They've sort of grown to their level of contentment, and this is how they are. They would like to stay exactly the same for the rest of their career, keep getting results with incremental degrees of success over time. And that's what they're after. If that's what they want, but they say that they want to be the best, oftentimes as a coach, I will support somebody as if we're trying to drive them to higher levels, and then they will pull back. They'll retreat away from the hard work because in reality, they don't actually want anything more than they have. Let's talk about great. What does it mean to be great? Great in sales means you always hit your goals and you're often succeeding your goals. People who are great, they know how to set goals, they know how to track goals. You don't really become great if you don't have some of those basic, project management, time management, incremental steps towards success sort of habits, okay? Great people have a lot of habits that they formed over time, for sure. So things that some people who are good have to consciously do. People who are great, they're doing them almost passively. They're doing them subconsciously because they have the repetitions. People who are great have a reputation that precedes them. So oftentimes they'll go out into the field and people say, oh yeah, you know what, we've heard about you, we've seen your brand out there, we got an email from you a couple of years ago, we've been sort of following you ever since, blah, blah, blah. When you're great, people will start to learn who you are, and oftentimes they'll know who you are before you introduce yourself to them. Great people often are slowly building a team around them over time, okay? So typically they have done more work than the good, and they usually had to use frameworks that were outside of themselves, which means frameworks that they then know how to recreate, pass on to subordinates, team members, partners, etc. So they're slowly building up a system around them. And this is one of the keys to success long-term is the people who figure out that all their goals are audaciously bigger than their own personal capacity. They either get depressed and bitter and they start blaming the world that they're not happy, or they figure out how to leverage people and powers greater than themselves to achieve what they want. And people who are great often have figured out how to flip that switch. They've stopped whining and they've started working, okay? That leads to people who are great are constantly improving. These are the people who read the books. These are the people who go to the conferences, who join the peer groups. Oftentimes people who are always developing, there's a sort of a dichotomy, and it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. People who don't know that they're bad, or people who don't know that they're dumb, oftentimes think that they're smart. Okay, that's a really interesting psychological phenomenon that if you're in sales or in business as a whole, you should study. People who are dumb are not smart enough to know how dumb they are. And then they falsely assume that they are smart because their perception of the world or the topic at hand is so small that they think they've already captured the majority of it. People who are excellent, they have more forgotten knowledge or subconscious knowledge than they have conscious knowledge, and they oftentimes take for granted that the average person has that same level of foundational subconscious knowledge. So they are constantly improving themselves, and they oftentimes have a smaller sense of self in that performative area than the dumb people do. The people who are super smart, people who are fantastic, oftentimes are much more humble simply because they've ingested enough of the world to know how much they don't know. And that results in people who are great constantly improving themselves. Fun fact, you might have the answer to this, but then when you actually examine your life, that your habits and then your initial thought might tell different stories. You might tell yourself that you're great or that you want to be great, but then when you read any of these definitions, none of them describe your lifestyle. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. Great people expect to win. Good people hope to win. Great people expect to win. Why? Because they've done the preparation. Because they have the proven track record. Because it's more often that they win than not. It's considerably more often. It's more often than what things are inside of their control, they do perfectly. And they are often limiting the variables that are outside of their control or making accommodations or preparations for how to navigate those variables when they don't go their way. Okay? People who are good, or dare I say even people who are average, things happen to them. The world happens to them, and that's their position. People who are great, the same stuff happens to them, but their mental posture is that they are always in a state of overcoming, and they don't think of themselves like a victim. And therefore, they're able to achieve and overcome the same variables that were thrown at the good people, but their mindset helped them get over the hurdle. Here's one of the things about being great, and this is a bit of a drawback. When you're great, most of your mental real estate goes towards your performance. What do I mean by that? If you've got a big sale that you've got in the pipeline and you're going into a 4-day weekend, come Saturday morning, Friday night, whatever, it's actually eating away. Even if it's in the back of your brain, it's always on. It's always on, okay? It's much harder when you're great, when you're excellent at something, to separate yourself from it. And this is one of the reasons you might not want to become great. For real. One of the reasons you might not want to be great is that it's going to require more of you. The end. If you want to be better than most people, you have to do more and be willing to do more than most people are willing to do. So let's talk about being the best. I debated between using when I've talked on this topic in the past, I use the phrase excellent rather than the best. But there's something about the best in this particular case that I think it illustrates my point a little bit more clearly. Because not everyone can be the best. Period. So why wouldn't everybody want to be the best? Well, let's talk about what it really means and what it really takes, and then you might know the answer to that question. First of all, the people who are the best, they almost always exceed their goals. And in fact, they are very surprised, as are all their team members, when they don't succeed. It's really uncommon for people who are the best not to hit all their goals, not to succeed, not to be the best, close the deal, get the promotion, whatever. So if you're really the best and you're considerably failing, then the question becomes, you're probably not the best, right? And let me say that another way. If you're actually the best, then you don't have to tell anybody that you're the best. Everybody will know it. And really, other people will say it before you have to. That's how you know you really hit it. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to justify yourself. You don't have to validate yourself. All of that is being done. Often, if you're truly the best, you've had to do some inner work to actually realize your own personal value. You've had to self-actualize a little bit, so you don't really need that same level of validation that people who are great need. Oftentimes, people who are great are only great because they're in pursuit of some other internal validation, right? And so oftentimes that comes with a little bit more flashiness, a little bit more arrogance, etc. But if you're really actually the best, you don't need to tell people about it. If you're the best, your reputation will beget more success for you. Because people know you're the best, other people will start coming to you. Opportunities will start coming inbound. You'll get more referrals. If you're not getting referrals in your current business and you're walking around telling everybody about how great your service offering is, I've got news for you. According to the data, you might not be as good as you think you are. If people aren't talking about you, you're not the best, period. Who's the best female gymnast in the world? You knew her name instantly, Simone Biles. Are you a women's gymnastics nut? Maybe you are. But if you aren't, you still know Simone Biles' name. Who are the best quarterbacks of all time? You've got 5 names in the top of your head, even if you haven't watched sports in 10 years. They did not have to tell you they were the best. You already knew it, and you weren't even in their orbit. See what I mean? Your reputation will beget more success, and people will talk about it, and people will come to you if you are actually the best. Here's one of the things about being the best that you might not be ready for. Being the best requires singular focus. Now, I'm going to use an example from my own life, and pardon the fact that this sounds like I'm calling myself the best, but I'm just going to use an example. If you've followed me for any time on the internet, you know that I am pretty singularly focused in my messaging. Feel Good MSP is the name of my company, but what I talk about all the time is MSP sales. And I talk about my process. I talk about how to do it right, what not to do, what things to avoid, what things to achieve. And it's all, and I'm always tethering it to my experience. It's grounded in my real world experience, my real examples of closing deals out in the wild, doing the stuff. Okay, I'm singularly focused. Why? Because I want to be the best MSP sales coach in the world. I don't want to be good. I want to be the best. Okay? So I'm singularly focused. What does that mean? I have to say no to other things in pursuit of of my career. I get offered a job every 2 or 3 months. Happens all the time. I get offered equity partnerships in startups 3, 4, 5 times a year. And I've had to turn everything into it's either a no or a hell yes because I have so many opportunities. But my point in saying that is not for you to listen to how cool I am. My point in saying that is that I made a choice to say yes to being the best at something, which builds in saying no to everything else. If I took every opportunity that came my way, I dare say I would never become the best. I would become good or great at a lot of different things. Not only have I had to make sacrifices in my career, I've had to make sacrifices in my life. I've had to not attend events. I've had to skip travel plans. I've had to shorten bereavement leave to achieve my goals. It has cost me, my pursuit of excellence has cost me something. And that's the thing about being excellent is you have to excel. You cannot be average. You cannot do what everyone else does. Dare I say, being the best actually requires a certain degree of imbalance. Greatness, I think you can reach an equilibrium, but being the best, think about a Guinness Book of World Record holder. Somebody who's eaten the most hot dogs in 5 minutes. That person is not balanced. Their life is not full. Their life is not normal. I was watching this interview. This was several Olympics ago, but a reporter or a journalist or something was talking to this athlete, and I think it was a track star, and they were trying to, just make the athlete more relatable and just figure out a little bit about their normal life. So the reporter, she said, "Hey, so just for the people at home, what's your favorite TV show?" And he said, "I haven't watched TV in 2 years." What's my point? He was so focused on being the best that he could not live a full normal, quote unquote, normal life. He had to say no to those other things. You see what I mean? And finally, the people who are the best, they're shocked when they don't win. Because they have done every single thing in their power, constantly pursuing excellence. It is very uncommon, it's very unlikely that they won't succeed. Now let's pause. I'm going to be candid with you about a few things. When it comes to selling, when it comes to being an MSP coach, MSP consultant, I want to be the best. Yeah, I want to be the best in the world. I want my sales consulting company to be the best option that there is in the world. I'm willing to pay a price for that. Now, let me say it another way. In my career as a CEO, I am not passionate about being the best CEO in the world. I'm not. I'm quite fine with being great. I'm quite fine with it. If another person is a better CEO than I am, that doesn't keep me up at night. I don't care enough about you to skip more time with my family so that I can read another book, attend another seminar, learn another life lesson. I'm quite fine being great, okay, in that area of my life. Does that make sense? But as a salesperson, yeah, I want to be the best. Period. What's some things I like to do for fun? Here's a fun game, ping pong. Love ping pong. Love playing ping pong. I'm quite fine being good. I'm fine being good enough to enjoy it when I play it, but I'm not willing to spend money on a coach to get better. No, I don't like it that much. Pool's super fun. I want to be good enough to enjoy it at a bar. I don't really care to be great. Okay? I just don't care. Another hobby, drums. I was a jazz drummer. I played jazz drums professionally for a couple of years. I did eight hours a day. I paid money. I had personal private lessons for years and years. I was in numbers and numbers of band. Yeah, I wanted to be great. Maybe even wanted to be the best. But when it came down to it, actually, I kind of settled on being great. I didn't want to move to Berkeley and uproot my life and do all these things so that I could become the best jazz drummer. No, I didn't. It didn't consume me. What's my point? I want you to ask yourself, for real, ask yourself, in your career, what do you want? No wrong answers. But if you expect to work with a coach, you expect to work with a consultant, oh, hell, if you expect to set a super clear goal and actually achieve it, you need to know the answer to this question. What are you? And what do you want to be? Good, great, or the best? Are you ready to pay the price of your answer? The price of being good is that other people will outperform you regularly. You will not get trophies. You will not get tons and tons of public recognition. You will not make as much money as the great. That's the price. But maybe that's a totally worthwhile price because you get to spend less time in the office, more time on your hobbies, more time with your family, more time in your whatever, the things that bring you true happiness. That's perfectly fine. But remember the trade-off that you're making, okay? Are you ready to pay the price of being great? The price of being great is you can't stop learning. You cannot be perfectly content with where you are. You have to want more than you want now. You have to do hard work. You cannot rest on the laurels of the successes of your past or your natural ability. If you want to be great, you've got to do something about it. And if you want to be best, you've got to do everything about it. You've got to do everything you can. If what you want is a couple of the bullet points of the best, but you don't want all of them, then I don't think you really want to be the best. I think what you want maybe is some recognition, maybe you want some more money, but if you're not willing to really do those things, then you need to either learn to enjoy and accept your life without those things, or you need to change your priorities. Otherwise, you're going to be filled with resentment, regret, disappointment, victimhood, however that manifests in you. Now, this is probably where I should end this episode, and the truth is I'm about to go on a little bit of a rant, and I don't know. I might pull this out. I might keep this in. I guess it depends how we feel when we're editing. But I scroll through forums sometimes for MSPs, and I look at what owners of these, the owners of this high 6, low 7-figure MSPs, the amount of whining in the channel absolutely blows my mind. And guys, listen, I'm not here to be a bully. I'm not here to make you feel bad about yourself. I'm not here to I empathize. I promise I understand how hard it is to do what you're doing. I promise I'm doing the same thing. I've done the same thing. I promise you I understand. But let me be clear. Passing the responsibility for your happiness to an external factor is never going to bring you the true happiness. Until you are ready to take ownership over your life, your career, your results, your goals, there will always be something to whine about and always be something to blame. So if you want to blame your employees, the economy, the market, the job hiring market, your customers, Kaseya, your PSA, your tech stack, the evolving industry, the president, new policies, international trade tariffs, the weather, acts of God. You could blame any of these things for any of your shortcomings. And you could find some validity there. But as long as you're playing that game, you, my friend, you are stuck in place. And as a coach and a consultant and as a purpose and success enthusiast, I must say to you, you owe it to yourself to zoom out, take responsibility, and say, maybe it isn't the world whose fault it is. Maybe it's mine. But I have great news for you. The fact that it is your fault is amazing news. It's the best news that you could possibly get. Because the second it's finally your fault is the second you can do something about it. My friends, I know I'm all fire and spicy on this one. I promise you, I'm not a bully. I'm not mean to my customers. I'm not even trying to be mean to you or any of you. I'm just very passionate about this. I'm very passionate about this. I want you to achieve everything you want and everything you deserve in life. And I feel I owe it to you to ask you the question, A, is it possible that what you don't have because of you? And B, is it possible that wherever you are on that chart, good, great, or the best, is it possible that you could take action right now and climb to whichever answer it is that you want for yourself? Now, I hope you honored the pact and you haven't really answered the question. You haven't said it out loud yet. What we're going to do is I'm going to land this plane, okay? I'm going to end this episode on this cliffhanger. And I want you to just spend a couple of minutes really thinking about the answer. And then what I'd like you to do is tell me. Brian at mspsalespodcast.com. I want you to email me. Subject line, good, great, the best. Tell me what your answer is and why. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much to all of our new podcast listeners. Listen, I was so excited to take the journey with you. I'm here for anything that you want to talk about, any topics that you're passionate about, that you want more education on. If you want more of this kind of stuff from me, then you can let me know. If you want more of the practical stuff and less of this sort of heavy stuff, all you got to do is let me know. You send out an email to hello@mspsalespodcast.com and give us your feedback.